Okay, we're on air, so thanks for joining us anyway. I'm going to make a quick presentation of what's new in Amfphp 2.2. And we're not going to go into the nuts and bolts of it, just to go and just look at the features and talk a bit about what we can do with it. And then we can do some questions and answers where you can just tell me a little bit about, well, questions and answers. You'll see what you come up with. And then we can do a workshop where we can do some hands-on work, and then we can go into the nuts and bolts of what you would be interested in. And yeah, and then we'll wrap up. Is that good for you?
Yay!
Okay, let's get started then. So I have my list here. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start with the under the hood stuff, and then we're going to move on to some more to talk about the back office. So the first thing that I'd like to talk about, and this is something that's been requested quite a bit by the community, I'm not sure how interesting this is for you, is support for namespaces. Since PHP 5.3 we've had namespaces, and there wasn't any support for it in Amfphp. Now we can. So the idea here is that we're looking at one of usual Amfphp service class, which is called namespace test service, and it is actually using a namespace here, which is nservice /sub1, and we can also have namespaces for our value objects. So if you're like sending typed objects, for example, sub1.namespace test.vo, which is a bit of a mouthful, but you get the idea, then you can actually map this to a namespace. Now, this is something we're not going to talk about how to use it, but we can look at this a bit later on if you're interested, so you'll tell me. Right, what else is new is that what used to be the custom class converter, which was used to map AMF typed objects to actual PHP classes, has been renamed to VO converter, simply for convenience, because nobody had any idea what custom class conversion really meant. And what's new is it inside is that first off is performance. If you're using AMF, and this is a bit, unfortunately, this is not possible for JSON, Joseph, is that you're going to get a lot better performance for mapping typed objects. And the other thing is that we can enforce typed object or value object conversion. The idea is that for most situations, it's all right to fail silently if you don't actually find a PHP class that maps a typed object that you're getting through in AMF. For example, you're sending an object from Flash that's called user. Then if there is no user class in PHP, then all you get is an anonymous class, and you can still use it. But for some scenarios, there's mostly when you're developing, you actually want to be notified when there is no such right object, and in that case, you can actually configure the VO converter so that it like pops an exception when you're sending an object from Flash or from HTML that has a type, and this type is not found in PHP. So not very glamorous, but useful under the hood. And one more thing that is of interest. I don't know if you use vectors by any chance in Flash. Is this something that you use? Mm-hmm. Well, yep. Now you can actually send vectors with Flash, and actually they will be understood in Amfphp. This is not yet the case, unfortunately, in Baguette AMF, unfortunately, Carol, but this is something that I'm working on. So if you're using vectors, then there's something that you might want to have a look at. So that was for the front office part, and now we're going to look at the back office. So you should now see, let me just log out, and we can start at the beginning. Do you see the new, do you see the back office on your screen? Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, so I know, Cheryl, you're using 2.1.1, so you've probably used to a different look, but as my understanding is that you don't really use the back office that much, do you?
No.
Okay, well, hopefully I'm going to make you want to use it by this little presentation. Matt, you, Joe?
I just started using 2.2.
Okay, so this won't come as a shock for you then. Right, well, what you've noticed, maybe if you've used preceding versions, is that there's a new design and the user experience that I've been doing with my colleagues from Silex Labs. More specifically, there's Paul Gouasdoué, who is a UX and design, well, guru is a big word, but he's pretty damn good, put it that way. And incidentally, if you're looking for somebody for some help in that, he's looking for some new clients. So I thought I'd drop his name in. So what's new here is that well, there's the news on the front page. This was something nice for the community, I thought, and it allows me to put my information forward. It tells you what version you're running, which is new, and it also tells you if you've got the latest version. Right. Let me see what else is there on the main thing. Oh yeah, the other thing is that before there was some client server mess ups, and now everything is purely running on the client. So, for example, what this means is in the service browser, you don't actually need to reload the page each time you make a request. So I've just logged in. Now we're going to have a look at, I think, what the tool is that most people use the most by far is the service browser. So this is where I've been putting quite a bit of effort into it. So the idea here is that you still have like the services and methods on the left, and you actually have the dialogue to try calling them on the right. And so one nice touch that I find is that if you actually mouse over one of the services, you can actually get the comments from the service. If you actually put a comment in the PHP code, this will actually come back up in the service browser directly. So this gives you ready access to your information, and this is for the service. So if I go, example, I mouse over this service name, it will tell you some stuff about what it does, and also for the method. And what you'll notice is it says double-click to call with default parameters, and so we're going to do that, just that. If we say test service return one param, I'm going to double-click it, and it makes the call directly. This is a new one. It just saves a bit of time when you're actually testing. Right, now we're going to look at the right column. You'll notice that I selected test service and return one param, and you actually find the comments from the PHP code that we saw in mouse server. They're also here in the dialog, so you can actually know what this does. You can hide it if you need to. I mean, if you put a lot of information, if you have a small screen, it's nice to be able to hide it. I'll leave it open for now. Now, if we look onto your call parameters, what you might have noticed is that here, the call where you put the parameters is empty, but here it's already pre-filled. And how this works is that we actually have a special format in the parameters documentation in the code where you just say example colon, and you just say what you would like for it to be pre-filled with. So here we have it pre-filled with this information that avoids you having to retype it each time you do it or do the usual cut and paste. One other nice thing I think is nice is that it's resizable, so if you need the space then you do, otherwise you can just collapse it if you just need to put in some small values. And so what this does support also, so do either of you use value objects, so sending typed objects from Flash and trying to recover them in Amfphp?
Yes.
Okay, well, you can actually do this in the service browser, and this is the way you do it, is the JSON format. You just set the explicit type to whatever you want, and it will actually work that way. So here, the explicit type isn't the best, but if we look at the value object service, where we actually have an example of sending real value objects, and this is actually a class that exists in the PHP code, and it's already pre-filled, and you can actually see it. So here's my name, my age, the status, and the explicit type. So if you're using type hinting, so for example, this here we're using, and we're saying, okay, this object must be of this type, then you can actually respect that in the service browser. All right, so let's have a look at this part of the dialog. Number 3, call the server. So what you could do before is you just simply call and that sends a JSON request. What's new here is, okay, that was the basic one where you don't want to think of too hard. In advanced, you see exactly the same one called JSON, just called a bit differently, so that you can understand that there's JSON and there's AMF. So if I do the same in AMF, well, it makes the same call and it behaves exactly the same, except this allows you to actually test, obviously, what happens in AMF. One possible use case is when in your Flash client you're getting a bad version. I'm sure you've seen this already. It's like when, for example, you have a trailing space or carriage return in your code somewhere, and therefore you're getting a corrupt AMF answer and something is messing up. Or you have a syntax error in your code, and it'll work to a point in JSON, but it won't work with AMF, and this allows you to test it directly without pulling out your full Flash or HTML client. Now, one more thing that I think is nice is the call repeater, and this allows you to load test a little bit, basically, as basic load testing of your server. So, for example, here we're going to say we have one concurrent call, and just say, okay, well, as soon as we get an answer from the server, we send a new request. And here, instead of the usual view, it tells you how many requests per second can be handled. So if you stop it, and we're sending one request, one concurrent call. So if we do actually, so I don't know, 5, let's say, we're going to see that actually we can handle a lot more. So we're up to 7 or 8 or even 9 requests per second when you get 5 concurrent calls. It gives you an idea of how your server behaves live. So that's the service browser. We're going to have another look at the call repeater a bit later on because it works nicely with this other thing, which is the profiler. This is the big new feature in AMFPHP 2.2, hence the name. It's AMFPHP 2.2 profiler, and the idea is that you're going to you want to measure performance and get an idea of this before you had to put some timed log files or some hack in your service, and it was kind of quite cumbersome really to understand where your server was spending time, and so the profiler is here to help you automate this and hopefully help you get more out of your server really. So let's make here's there's nothing in it, so we can't see anything. Let's have a look in. Let's make a request. Let's make a few requests actually. So one to return one param, so we make one call. One to return sum and one return null, and maybe a couple more to return one param. So, and now that should give us some data in the profiler. So here we see average durations for calls in milliseconds for each of the 3 calls that I made. So it's sorted by service, and now if you actually click on one, you can actually see the details for each call. So I think it was returning one param that I made multiple calls to. So here you see that first call took the first call, the second call, and the third call. Now, what information is actually in this here? Let's go back to the average duration. The first, well, the legend is here. It says the first one is deserialization, so this is conversion from AMF or JSON here to a PHP object. Then next is the value object conversion, and this is in blue. Then the service call itself. Then the value object conversion in the other direction, and finally the serialization. Now obviously these are very simple requests, there's really not much going on, so the first thing you'll notice is we're spending time in the request value object conversion, but it's really only 1 millisecond, and the other one is that, well, when there's really no time, it's 0, then nothing shows up. Now, if we're going to look at something a bit more complicated, let's have a look at this one method called return large dataset, which asks the server to generate 1,000 objects. By default, you can actually tune it to do some other more or less if needed. Here we see that we've got plenty of objects, and we're going to have a look at what that did on the server. So we only did one call. We're not going to look at the details here. But here we see that most of the time is being spent in the response value object conversion. This is why I'm saying that as soon as you have a lot of data, this response value object conversion or request value object conversion, it takes actually a lot of time. And this is why there's this nice speed bump when you're using AMF. So if we look at, do the same with AMF, so we get exactly the same data coming back, but if we refresh here and we actually go have a look. So this is the first call, fair enough, and this is the second call, and you see it's going quite a bit faster because we're using AMF. This is without even using baguette AMF, where these 16 milliseconds would probably be 1 or 2 milliseconds. If you need some more explanation, there's these nice little question marks that will bring you to the right part in the documentation. All right, so now the question is, what happens when you actually want to go a bit deeper than this information? For example, you're making several requests to a database on your server, and so you want to know how long each is taking. I've got you covered for that, and the idea is to use custom markers on top of the existing ones. So here I'm going to call, let me find it, test custom monitor time. So the idea here is that this is a very simple method that uses custom markers each time separated with a 200 millisecond timer. So, whoops, that was the wrong one. So here it's loading, and now if we go back to this, oh, whoops, sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Here we go. I'll just refresh. Here we see actually the usual markers plus 3 custom markers, custom operation 1 to 3, and they're shown here in this kind of beetroot purple color. So that allows you to actually fine-tune your information when you actually need to go deeper in what's going on here. So that's more or less it for the profile. I'd like to wrap up with something kind of cool, I find at least, was when you use the service browser's call repeater with alongside the service browser, the profiler. So, for example, we're going to call this one, let's say return large data set, and we're going to set some concurrent calls, and we're going to repeat calls, and we're going to watch that happen live here on the server. So here you see actually the requests coming in live. So it's limited to 20 requests because the point is not really for you to see or to put it all over your screen. But if you want, you can actually flush and request, and then you only see the 1 or 2 requests, and it just gives you a snapshot of what your server is doing right at that moment, really, and how it behaves. So that's just about it for the new version. So I'm going to stop there and I'll take the webcam back. Well, there you are. Any thoughts that you'd like to share? Well, first, or questions. I mean, this is what we're here for. So,
well, the profiler fits exactly what I need at this point in time. So, thanks.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Did you actually know about it before this presentation?
I actually, when I went to 2 weeks ago,
right.
And I was watching it, and now when you showed the the 20, I need that right now. So I'm going to go, when we're done with this, I'm going to go use it immediately.
Well, yeah, like I said, there's a workshop afterwards for those who want to, so we can actually try it online if you want. I mean, that's totally cool with that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions? Any other ones? Apart from, I'm glad you like it. That's a start. But other than that,
have you looked at Red 5 in terms of any integration between the two? I mean, I have no knowledge with this. It's just something I'm walking over to in my next enumeration of the software.
Well, Red 5 I know of. I haven't tried it in a long time. The first thing that you're going to see is that Red 5 and AMF-PHP, well, Red 5 is Java, whereas AMF-PHP is, well, PHP, obviously. So they're not going to play nice together on the same server. I mean, it's doable, but I'm not really sure I see what you want to do with Red 5 and how would you like to integrate them. I mean, sure, why not, but what's your use case?
My case is to create. Right now, I'm controlling. It's with live events, and if I can take and use live cameras, and then pull them in, much like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
And then I can use it as an educational software to take iPads and and other Android camera phones and use them as a switching system.
So you'd like to use it as a streaming server then, right?
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
and somehow control it via AMFPHP. Would this be it?
Yes, it would simplify things for me. Otherwise, I'd have.
Otherwise, you'd have to code some Java, probably.
Well, I'm up for that.
Okay, well, on this, I don't have much of an answer to give you, but I can see your point. Let me have a think, and we can discuss it maybe afterwards. My suggestion off the bat would be not to use a streaming server unless you really need one, but I mean, for example, my understanding is that YouTube, for example, doesn't use a streaming server. It does basic HTTP downloads rather than actually bothering with a streaming server. I mean, streaming server for me is really useful for some other use cases, such as maybe broadcasting and multicasting and or live events, this kind of thing.
I like that thought. The other way I'm doing it is actually because I'm looking probably that everything is after the fact. Just sending a data stream with pointers, like a time code, and just having that be integrated with the actual camera phones at the same time, and then unite the pieces all together later.
Okay, that works. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for me. From what you're telling me, is to actually build your usual application where you could actually control the data and communicate with the server with AMFPHP, and then when it comes to actually pulling a video, is just to use like progressive downloads, very basic. That allows you to keep it low tech, really.
I like that.
Okay,
I think that's already exists in your system already.
I haven't done much work with video and AMFPHP, but I mean, if you want me to have a look at it, I mean, this is something that we can discuss afterwards, definitely.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Anything else? Well, Cheryl, do you want to say something?
Well, I love the profiler. I think you finally have gotten me to the point where I might actually use the back office.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. All right. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
No.
Oh, good. Well, okay. Well, do you want to actually try this together, or do? I mean, the workshop is really. I've got to admit, I haven't really prepared much. I prepared the presentation, but I thought the workshop would just see what people are interested in doing and then take it from there. Is there anything you would like to try look at together? I mean, otherwise, I mean, if you just want to get this presentation has given you food for thought, and you want to try it offline and then get back to me by email, that works too. I mean, I'm glad to give some support. What do you want to do?
I want to play. You got my appetite whet, and I just want to knock some code down and see where it takes me.
Okay. In that case, well, I suppose you'll be doing. There's no point in us doing that online, then, right?
No, absolutely. Thank you, though. I mean, it's a great system.
Okay.
You know,
well, you're welcome. I'm glad to. I try to provide value for people, and hopefully that will provide some income for me. So,
yeah. This is just such a great product, and I just really, I hope it. I wish you the best success, because your success means my success.
Well, remarks like that is what keeps me going, because the business side isn't really going yet. I mean, Baguette AMF is starting to sell, but it's not making me earn my keep yet. So I have to keep bootstrapping. So.
Well, what you might find interesting is when I put this out, I'm going to make sure that it always has a donation to the things that are actually propelling it, like AMS. And I'm going to try Baguette to see if that helps the latency.
Okay.
Which is something that's the biggest problem with using all this, is that I have to keep latency low.
Okay. Well, BucketAMF is going to help you have a lot of data, or a lot of users. But if you're just sending random, small amounts of short messages, it won't really help you that much. It's really about large amounts of data. So, I mean, just give it a try. I'm just telling you where the use case is really.
I may have sometimes 1,000 streams all being pulled at the same time.
That sounds like a lot, actually. Well, give it a try. I mean, really, I'd be glad to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, great.